Ni hao and hello. Welcome to Group 10's Pastel Analysis of China. Please join us as we discuss and analyze the political, economical, socio-cultural, technological, environmental, and legal systems of China. China is the fourth largest country in the world, but it's just slightly smaller than the US. Their population, however, is the world's largest, toppling in close to 1.4 billion people. In the 70s, in order to reduce rates, the government offered incentives to families with only one child. Through the one-child policy, the population dropped significantly, and by 2015, the government adjusted policies to allow couples to have two children again. Life expectancy for males and females are both mid to late 70s. However, they have uneven male to female ratios, with 100 females to every 115 males. Looking at ethnic diversity, we see that China does not have much diversity in comparison to the US.
The political system. The National People's Party of China is one of the most important actors in international affairs today. It is described as a communistic totalitarian government, one that utilizes absolute dominance and forbids any opposition. China has been seen moving toward greater economic freedom, but continues to deny its citizens of its political freedom. The Index of Freedom in the World gives China a score of 16 on a scale of 0 to 100, with 0 being worst and 100 being the best. The Economist's Political Stability Index measured China's political stability with a negative 0.54 in 2014, which would mean China is unstable. However, China is not considered unstable or most vulnerable due to it being led by one party, the Communist Party. It does have political risks, such as legal and regulatory transparency, as well as in the scope of intellectual property, which is one of China's top risks of concern for foreign markets. With China's political instability, it also has major issues with corruption. Transparency International CPI ranks China 41.8 on a scale of 0 to 100, while the U.S. has a rate of 78.1. China's Communist Party President Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign has reached the highest echelons of the party as the leadership rejects more fundamental reforms. Despite these efforts, corruption remains widespread. The World Bank measures China's worldwide governance indicator rule of law as a negative 0.33, which means China also has a weak rule of law. Foreign companies continue to find themselves at a disadvantage in legal disputes, in dealing with regulators, as well as demands for bribes and other inducements. These and other political risks may derail economic reform in China.
The United States and China are the world's most competitive economies. Many indexes predict the two to maintain as leaders for the rest of the 21st century. Let's consider the Economic Freedom Index. The United States of America, with a score of 75.4%, is considered mostly free. In contrast, China falls below the world average of 60.7% at 52%, therefore indicating China's economy as repressed. Ironically, it should be noted that Hong Kong, a territory of the People's Republic of China, is currently ranked as the most economically free by heritage. As we deliberate whether or not to bring our businesses to China, let's compare key market factors. China is leading in annual GDP growth at 7.4% to the United States' 2.4%. The United States still leads in GDP, however, at $17.42 trillion to China's $10.36 trillion. The United States GDP per capita is still significantly higher than China's at about 54,000 in comparison to 7,500. The gross National income of China has surpassed the U.S. for the first time in history at $17.92 trillion dollars in comparison to the U.S.'s $17.81 trillion dollars. The U.S., however, is generating more in government revenue at $2.7 trillion dollars in comparison to China's $2.1 trillion dollars. Both countries are comparable in their exports at $2.34 trillion dollars. However, China is importing about $1 trillion less than the United States. China is dominating the technology market by more than $400 billion in exports. China is also projected higher FDI inflows than the US, and the Chinese reserve is resounding at a $3.9 trillion estimate, lot higher than the $434 billion in the US Reserve itself. However, the disposable income of the Chinese is still significantly lower than the US, all of which markers and demographics indicate that the Chinese market is fairly stable and growing.
As we look at the social culture of China, we can begin with the social structure. There are 9 tiers, starting with Tier 1, head honchos, which are current members of the Communist Party Politburos. Tier 2 are the bigwigs. These are the ministers or retired Politburo members. Tier 3, the power brokers, are considered to be the ministers and level heads with less power, or owner of top companies. Tier 4, the privileged, are country-level party heads, either university professors, top managers, and large corporations. Tier 5 is very comfortable. They're successful to small and medium business owners. Tier 6, the squeezed, are white-collar workers. Tier 7, the marginalized, are factory workers. Tier 8, the underclass, are migrant workers. Tier 9 are the destitute, long-term unemployment urban residents. In order to avoid misunderstandings and build relationships with China, we must be aware of China's business culture and social etiquette. We look at this by understanding concept of Hofstede's dimensions and comparing our Western outlook with China's. As we look at the dimension of power distance, we see that China scores high of 80, demonstrating a need for honor and respect for those with higher status. Subordinates are expected to be obedient to their supervisors. In Hofstede's dimension regarding individualism versus collectivism, China scores low on individualism. The people of China believe in guanxi, meaning relationship. Their low score of 20 demonstrates a collectivist society. When it comes to masculinity, rank prone and competitive behavior are synonymous within the US and China. Within uncertainty avoidance, China scores lower than the US, meaning risk is not desirable and stability and structure are necessary. China and the U.S. fall on opposite spectrums when it comes to long-term orientation as well as indulgence. China's high score demonstrates a devotion to traditional values and long-term investments. Their low score on indulgence demonstrates restraint and less emphasis on fun and leisure. When it comes to education, China and the U.S. have different learning approaches. While the Chinese focus on strictness and precision to achieve retention, the American education system focuses on independence and self-determination to achieve comprehensive thinking. Let's take a look at the PISA scores from 2009 through 2015 and see how the two countries compare in reading, math, and science. As you can see, in math, U.S. lags behind China, while reading scores are neck and neck for 2015. And then within the last 6 years, the U.S. is coming close to China's scores in science. Chinese language is comprised of 6 main dialects. Mandarin is considered to be the official language of China. However, about 30% of the population still cannot speak Mandarin, as Cantonese is spoken by more than 60 million people. As we look at the side-by-side graphs of religions in China and the U.S., we can see that almost half of China's population is unaffiliated, as China is considered to be atheists, Well, the main religion in the U.S. is Christianity, which can be broken down into Catholics, Protestants, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Orthodox Catholics.
In recent years, technology in China has progressed tremendously. Technology plays a large role in the Chinese culture due to the emphasis it gives on higher social status. When we compare China to the United States, China shows more growth. In regards to advancement in research and development, China shows to have a steep incline, whereas the United States is seen to be more at a plateau. China has also been experiencing large growth in their patent applications in the past few years. The large role of technology in China's economy shows large promise for growth in their economy overall for the future.
With increased industry and production, China has experienced worsening air quality. This became more evident with the Beijing Summer Olympics when air pollution threatened the Olympic Games. In terms of environmental protection, China ranks 109th with a score of 65.1. In the last 10 years, China has made slight improvements but still somewhat marginal. Air quality, in particular, is the largest setback. Despite the increased awareness of the effects of air pollution on climate change, China still fails when it comes to clean air, and it seems to be worsening. We can see that the United States, however, has been modestly successful in decreasing air pollution. In addition to environmental protection, we must also consider legal protection as we look to expand into China. China's legal system, as documented in its constitution, varies somewhat from reality. While it is officially a civil law system with the National People's Congress at the top, we really see that the Communist Party is in control. Despite a constitution that supposes independence of the judiciary, the judicial system is still highly influenced by the Chinese Communist Party. With a legal system influenced by the ruling party, how has this affected intellectual property and growth? Patents have significantly increased over the past 15 years in China, while in the United States, industrial design has seen increased growth over patents. Furthermore, resident patents have overtaken and surpassed non-resident patents in the last 10 years without a particular trend to industry, while in the United States, non-resident patent grants seem to outnumber resident patent grants at a steady rate. Trademark registrations have also increased, but still much more preferential to residents than non-residents. Interestingly, trademark registrations from abroad have seen a drastic increase in the United States over the past decade, and it follows that many of these trademarks from abroad likely come from China. Property rights are critical to economic growth. Not surprisingly, we have not seen a significant change in property right protection within the last few years. Changing the legal and political landscape is near impossible in a short period of time, and intellectual property rights can be nearly just as difficult to change. The only somewhat modifiable variable in this index is physical property rights, which we see is a dependent factor in China's overall score.
Still have questions? Let's perform a SWOT analysis. The strength of the Chinese market can be seen in its rapid economic growth, open and globalized market, appealing foreign direct investment, technologically advanced culture, large population which encompasses 25 to 54-year-old majority, a cheaper labor and production, as well as a high emphasis on mathematical and scientific education. The weaknesses of the Chinese market can be seen in its social inequality, its inflation rate, which is more rapid than its wage growth, the overpopulation of people, the weaker political stability, the unemployment rate, which is rising, and the pollution. The projected appreciation of the foreign exchange rate of Chinese currency, the cultural values of loyalty, the favorable trading trends in China, as well as the high frequency of patents and trademarks are premier opportunities with the Chinese market. We conclude our SWOT analysis with the threats of the Chinese market. When entering the Chinese market, a business should be mindful of the low rule of law, the high corruption, the moderately low economic freedom, the high government involvement in ownership in business, the low international property rights, and as well as the high risk of intellectual property theft. all of which within this analysis should be taken into account when considering entering the Chinese market.